All right, well, welcome everyone again to another workshop here at the Test Camp. And thanks to our host here today. This is Science Education for Secondary Grades. Let's discuss how learning and practicing test skills will empower your test confidence. Now, those of you joining us today live online, we wish you could be here with us, but you're welcome to contribute your comments anytime. We're going to include them right up here in the discussion areas. And if you joined us today on demand through the Test Camp YouTube channel, well, of course, welcome to you too. You can pause or restart or replay that video anytime. Again, this workshop is for the science education tests, like those that you see listed here. Now, workshops for the elementary grade science are available over at the other training sites. And I'll respond to any questions you might have here today, and I'll repeat them for those who are listening in on the recording. Okay, here's our first question right over here. I'll repeat it for the people listening in. All right, so the question is about higher levels of science, like anatomy or physiology or maybe chemistry. Well, those competencies are not used to create science education tests. These are generally going up through middle school. That's just about it in terms of curriculum. These tests go, like I say, through the middle grades courses, but those other ones are standalone. So we do have some training sites for those, but they would be individually named, like anatomy, chemistry, physiology. Great question. Thank you very much. All right, so you likely know by now that around here our motto is prepare, practice, perform. And everyone who has successfully completed the training has passed their tests. Now that's because test taking is a skill, and all skills require practice. And this is the only place where you can come online anytime and learn and practice those test skills. So to prepare here at the Test Camp means understanding both the content and understanding yourself. Have an honest assessment of how well you know what's going to be on the test, the rules of the test, and then of course your testing skills. That's where you get the confidence. So we start by learning about the blueprints. And those of you who participated in the career workshops, well, you know the blueprint provides all the information you need to fully understand what's expected of you on these tests. Now, how many of you have participated in some of our other workshops, or you've watched them on demand? Okay, good. So you know assessing the blueprint, that's a first indicator how well you're going to perform on the test. You understand the content, you'll understand the rules, add that to your test skills training, and you're all set. Here's a helpful tool, is what we call My Study Plan. That's a schedule that includes reviewing and studying test content. So this plan will guide you through the test skills training program designed specifically for the science tests. And also about the blueprint, where we always start is by identifying the types of science questions. And these are called competencies. And we know that everything is multiple choice, so we're not talking about the format. We're talking about the competencies on which questions are built. And we provide practice on each competency in our individual quizzes over at the training center, and you'll see that here in just a little bit. The first quiz is based on the competency nature of science. So taking a quiz based on this competency provides you instant feedback and points you in a direction you might want to review and study. The second competency on most science tests is physical science, excuse me. There it is up here. Can you imagine what you might be asked about in this competency? Well, we're going to take a closer look, including some sample questions in just a few moments. The third competency is earth science, and you might be surprised what's included in this area. We're going to look at that in just a moment too. Next is space science. Again, we'll look at some sample questions based on this competency a little bit later in the workshop. Now, since the test is for teaching professionals, we're going to skip down here to the bottom and talk about teaching science. Now, this is a competency that can account for up to 20% of some science education tests. And we're going to discuss how teaching science is unique, especially in terms of student safety. That's the key word, safety. But before we go any further here, let's take a moment to introduce yourself at the tables there and see if you can identify what that missing competency is and right there. I think you pretty much already have an idea, but if you still have some time before we get back together as a group, discuss this concept and everything it might include. All right, we'll come back as a group in just a few minutes. Hey, thank you again for those of you joining us live online. If you'll share your thoughts, we'll include them up here in the discussion. And if you're joining us by watching that pre-recorded video on demand, this might be a good time to pause the recording and identify that last competency. We'll be here when you restart the video. All right, which group had this fifth competency? Here, pretty much everybody, didn't we? What did you say it was? Biology? All right, well, on this test, the competencies are generally called life science, which is biology. I've heard your group discussions about this. It can cover a wide array of concepts. You are absolutely correct, and that's why we're going to spend a little bit more time on that. We'll look at some sample questions we're built on life science in just a few moments. All right, let's begin up there at the top. We'll go right in order on these. We'll begin with nature of science. And according to the Test Information Guide, the skills related to this competency include understanding theories and laws of science, experiments that lead to better understanding of those theories and laws, and the effects of science on society and culture. And here's the first sample question. We generally start down there at the bottom. So explored, proven, observed, replicated. Now let's see how many honest folks we actually have here. Did you start down at the bottom or did you start up here at the top? How many started by reading the STEM first? You don't mind telling us? Thank you for being honest. Raise your hand if you started down here though, like I did, with the answer set. And why we would do this is because it helps you become focused on the competency. Exactly. So let's look at another sample question and start down here at the bottom. Dependent, observed, independent, controlled. And without even reading the question up there, you probably know where we're headed with this. Yep, that's a nature of science. That's an experiment. All right, is this going to be a nature of science question? We generally start down here at the bottom. Okay, how about this one? When you're just looking only at the answer set, can you tell? Sure it is. Okay, let's see if we have. Yes, we're going to move on. There we go. We're going to go to the second competency. The knowledge you need to know to demonstrate physical science is matter, the properties of matter and how matter changes. Also included is the knowledge of energy. And the categories of energy represented by test questions include chemical, electrical, and mechanical. All right, so let's look at a sample question. This is the physical sciences. So you can see how this is related to matter, right? Okay. Here's another sample question. Let's see if it's related to the physical sciences. Yes, it is. The word chemistry is right there in the STEM. All right, how about this one? What's the concept going to be here? Matter, exactly. All right, how about one more of these? Is this a physical science question? Okay, why are you saying that? Because of energy, right. What type of energy would you call this? Electrical energy, there you go. So let's move on to the third competency, which is earth science. And we're going to take some time for you to work together there at your tables. This is a workshop, so you all have introduced yourself already. Let's go ahead and decide what knowledge might be expected with earth science. Make a list of some of the concepts that you think might be covered in this area, and we'll compare your list when we come back as one big group. All right, thank you again for those of you joining us today live online for sharing your thoughts, because we're going to include them up here in the discussion. And if you're joining us on demand, this might be a good time to pause the recording and test your knowledge. How might you be tested on the competency earth science? What are some of those questions? What are they going to look like? And we'll be here when you return, when you restart the video. All right, so we're talking here about earth science. We've had some good discussions out there. Now, earth science might be represented on your test. Everybody's got your list ready. Here was the first. Yes, the first area was geology, the study of, right? Ology, the study of the earth. More specifically, it's the physical structure of the earth and its history. Did you have that? Most tables had that. All right, let's move on to the next one, which is atmosphere, the blanket of gas that surrounds the earth. Yes, so atmosphere is not about space when they're doing it on the science education test. Basically, it's about the earth. It's just a way for you to organize your knowledge, that's all. If you want to think of it as space, you can. There's not going to be anything on the test to ask you, is this a Earth question or a space question? But can you imagine what the questions might look like here? What would they want to know about the atmosphere? Lithosphere, right. Biosphere, so the spheres, right. Very good. All right, so the next concept is transfer of energy. Remember before we talked about energy, this is the transfer of energy. Is there an example that any of the groups came up with? Energy, solar panels, okay? That's a transfer of energy from the sun into electrical power, right, and then maybe into mechanical. All right, so let's look at some questions from the test camp quizzes. See if you can identify them as representing this competency, Earth science. Start down there in the answer set. Is this Earth science? Sure it is. It's the study of the Earth. It's geology. One more sample here. Let's give you another one here. Which concept are we talking about here? Right, atmosphere. Very good. And let's do one more. Yeah, we're not trying to answer these. We would never go this quickly. We're just trying to get an idea of the competencies. There we go. So another Earth science question. And you're going to see more and more of these types of questions now on the test too. If you were to explain this question in just one word, what would you say? What's the overall theme here? Sustainability, okay? Anybody else? Conservation, all right, recycle, all good terms. So be on the lookout for a couple of these on the test. Well, that's a look at the concepts related to Earth science. The next competency then is space science. And the main concepts in this competency include the sun, earth, and moon, the solar system, and space exploration. So we can see now why maybe atmosphere went with Earth, with the Earth. This is space science. All right, let's take a look at some sample questions from space science. All right, here's one more question. And I think we have one more here. Yes, we do. So as you can see in each case, these test questions were built not only on science, but more specifically on space science. And that's going to help you when you go to the quizzes because you'll know if this is an area that you might want to review or study. Okay, before we go on, are there any other questions related to the competencies we looked at so far? I don't want to just plow through here. Yes, over here. Go ahead. I'm going to repeat this for the people who are listening in on demand. Yes, that's a good question. Even though they're shown here separately and we have separate quizzes, all of our practice tests, the questions are mixed. They're also randomized. So each time you attempt them, you'll get a new test. Yes, and that's the way it is on the test also. So great question. All right, the next science competency, where we left off there. So now we're on life science. And like we mentioned earlier, one word that might be used to represent this competency then would be, yes, biology. And this might be the closest word. However, this competency does have a wide-ranging set of concepts. So let's take some time again for you to work together. Decide what concepts you think might be included in life science. And this isn't easy, I don't think, unless you happen to be a science teacher. So let me go ahead and get you started on your list here. The first one would be the characteristics of life. So how we better understand the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, that sort of thing. We create names and labels based on their characteristics. All right, so I got you started. All right, so your turn. What other areas of life science would be on a science education test? Discuss this at your tables. We'll come back with our list and compare it with yours. All right, those of you joining us today live online, if you continue to share your thoughts, we'll go ahead and include those in the discussion. And if you're joining us on demand, this might be a good time to pause the recording and test your knowledge of life science. What are the different categories or the different areas of life science? We'll be here when you restart the video. Okay, we are back up here. Right, go ahead. Yes, we're back. So did anybody come up with classifications? Okay, this group did. So what are some classifications? Kingdom, species. Wasn't there something called phylum too, right? Okay. How about evolution? Did you talk about the evolution of life? A couple of groups did. Did anyone say life cycles? No one said life cycles. You know what we mean here? This is the developmental stages of growth. Okay, all right, so you did have this one. All right. Here's another one, cell functions. Do you remember that there were 3 main cell functions? We get into that more specifically over in the training areas for biology. And the last concept in this competency then is environment. And your group had this. Can you describe it? I'll repeat it for the people listening to the recording. All right, see if I say this how you did. How plants and animals interact with their surroundings. How did I do? Okay, so that's environment. Let's take a look at some sample questions that represent life science, starting down there at the bottom with cytoplasm, DNA, ribosomes, organelles. Am I saying that right? Here's another life science example. And I think we have one more. All right, so on to the final competency, which is teaching. There are 8 main competencies related to teaching in most states. However, only 4 really are represented on this test. And here's the acronym we use to remember the main teaching competencies. You can learn these over in our training centers for the learning and teaching tests, and in some states it's called professional education. But the first competency then is planning for learning. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You start with planning. These questions are most often related to achieving standards and benchmarks. However, on a science test, the emphasis is on planning for safety. Science teachers are expected to think through all the procedures and equipment needed, especially when they're planning an experiment. The second competency then is environment, or more specifically, learning environment. On other tests, the emphasis is on creating a student-centered environment. This is where the student feels comfortable and not threatened. They feel safe. On this science test, though, the emphasis is also on safety. However, it's a different kind of safety. It's not a mental safety. Right, it's a physical safety. There you go. You've got it. All right, so you're making sure that the room is safe. And that leads you into the third competency, which is the strategies for teaching. This is different than planning. On this test, you might be seeing a trend for what we're talking about here, which is just safety, safety, safety. And in this case, that is correct also. The strategies refers to what the teacher is doing during the lesson when the students are present, so keeping them safe. And the final competency related to teaching then is assessment. What do you think the focus might be here? Safety? No, it's differentiation. Anyway, you might think of this as allowing the students to feel safe about demonstrating their learning, I guess, but it's allowing for differentiated assessments. And I'm sure you're familiar with that if you've been in teaching or you're in a teacher education program. Okay, so these might become more clear if we look at some sample questions. All right, starting with the answer set. Predicting emergencies. Oops, let me back up here. Predicting emergencies. Identifying materials. Ensuring equipment's there. Assigning students. I don't know that that's ever a good idea. Let's look at what do you think this is? So do you think this would be a planning question? Sounds like it to me too. Okay, but I don't think it would ever be the correct answer to say to assign the students to it. Not when you're talking about safety. Here's another question. Start down there in the bottom. Okay, that's another one. Planning an experiment. And here's a question related to assessment. All right, so here again are the competencies used by professional test writers to construct your science test. What would you say is a reasonable goal for a grade on a standardized test? What do you think is a reasonable, say, percent to pass? Well, here at the test camp, the required percent to pass is 80%, which is a bit higher than most pass-fail standardized tests. So if your test has, say, 20 questions on it, then how many would you need to pass? Yes, that's right. I'll make a mark on here real quick. Okay, so 16 out of 20, right. So just check the test information guide. Of course, you're going to have more than 20 questions, but make sure you've checked with an advisor or someone maybe at the district or at the college and make sure that you're taking the correct test. Probably at the district is the best place to check. Now let's look at this in a different way as we kind of wrap this up here. If you're facing this test based on only one of these competencies, yeah, we said you needed 16 out of 20. Which would you choose? So if you're taking the quizzes today, which one would you consider less challenging? Or is there a competency area that you consider more challenging? All right. And then, of course, maybe what you might want to talk about in your groups is how do you plan to review for a standardized test like this? Okay. Talk it over at your tables, and we'll discuss your preferences as a group. Hey there, thanks again for those of us that joined us today live online for sharing your thoughts, and continue to do that here now, and we'll include them up here in the discussions. And if you're watching this pre-recorded workshop, pause the recording and maybe you can do a little self-reflection. Which would you choose? Where are your strongest areas? Which are your more challenging areas? And how do you prepare for a standardized test? Come back and join us anytime. Restart the video. Okay, we're back up here. We've had some pretty good discussion about the strategies to review and study for a standardized test. I think we can say there was no right way. Is that what we agreed on? But we do agree that there are areas that we do need to review and study and prepare for. And speaking of preparing for the test, good for you. You've joined this workshop. I hope you've gained some knowledge here today, right? It's been good. It's been worth your time. Good. And you learned a little bit about yourself. Well, another way to prepare is to select the tools you might need, those resources that will help you guarantee your success. And so you can expect over in the training site to see this sign along the pathways. This is put up by those people who have gone before you, the teachers and teacher candidates. They want to send you encouraging messages or messages of warning in this case, which is to avoid spending your time and money on expensive resources that you don't need. Commercial webinars are a good example. They suggest that you avoid paying for information that's really out there that's already free. There's free test strategies available to you. We've even talked about them some today, and of course you don't get charged for any of that sort of thing. So beware of commercial websites and webinars. Expensive tutors and tutoring companies, they might be an option for more of those challenging tests like you talked about back there, maybe for what'd you say, anatomy, physiology, chemistry, sure. But not for this test. This is going up through middle grade science. Overpriced study guides are sold for profit. Have you seen these out there? They're in the bookstores. Many of the study guides are available and they're either free or inexpensive. We're going to show you how in just a minute to find those. And of course, the most effective and inexpensive resource is textbooks. And now that you know the competencies being tested, you can use textbooks to review and study the test content. So over at the training site in the My Resources area, this is where you can find the most popular and up-to-date tools. All right, and you can see there's a whole lot there. A lot of those are free, and you can even get a study guide there for, $5 or less. So the suggestion they have is not to invest your time and money on resources. It's to invest in yourself. Practice your test skills. Expect to gain confidence and personal independence that you can then pass on those skills to your students. Now your pass here provides admission to these training areas, and you can see up there at the top is what's called My Test. Now, this is an activity that enables you to check your understanding of the test blueprint and everything we've talked about here today. You can also take a pretest before you begin training. This is the test camp problem solving system, and the first step to finding the correct answer is what we've been doing today. Identify the type of question by the competency. Quizzes and tests provide an opportunity to practice your test skills while assessing your test knowledge. And I think this is what you're going to ask. Yes, there are separate quizzes based on each one of the competencies. Go ahead. Yes, you have multiple attempts on these, and the questions and answers change randomly on each attempt. Down there, we also have the testing area, which has practice tests, and a post-test, which can earn you points towards a professional test certificate. And that guarantees your success. So expect to perform with confidence that comes from the knowledge and the skills that you earn during the training. Ready to get started? There's no better time than now to empower your test confidence.